So today we are talking about organizations in Workday, right? So in Workday, uh, an organization is a term, right, or a tool which is used by Workday to go ahead and represent or group various tasks, people, or resources. Now we'll go ahead and expand on that term in a bit, right? What I just mentioned, right? However, for now, if I talk about organizations, once we talk about different kinds of organizations, this would become clear, right? So an organization in Workday is used to group resources, right, workers and costs in order to support a specific or a particular business function, right? Now Workday supports different kinds of organizations, each having a specific function or a purpose. For example, location is an organization in Workday, right? What does it do? It allows me to identify all locations which exist. Now those can be a physical location or a functional location, right? That can be a building, a area, or maybe a cubicle, right? However, irrespective of what a location represent for me in my project, it is created in a similar fashion or a similar manner, right? Similarly, I have an organization in Workday, though it is not directly created in my HCM. It's just used in HCM. It is a financial object. However, I have an organization called a cost center, right? Now, what would a cost center do? It would allow me to identify for each of these different functions or areas. It would allow me to collate my costs, right? To identify how my cost is being structured, right? I have an organization called company, again, not directly related to HCM, but then an organization type in Workday. What does it do? It allows me, it is a legal entity. So when I do my legal reporting to government or a legal agency, I show them my profit and loss, my taxes. They are all done with respect to a company, right? I have a organization called supervisory organization, right? Now this is the foundation organization. All my staffing, I hire people on a supervisory org, I create positions on a supervisory org, I do any other staffing with respect to a supervisory org, right? So I promote, transfer, I change job of my people, all with respect to a supervisory org, right? There's also something called a matrix organization, right, which we will talk about. Now Workday gives you quite a few organization types. However, let's assume none of the delivered organization types support your specific business requirement. What you can also do is you can go ahead and create something called a custom organizations, right? Now these would act and behave exactly the same way uh, as your normal organizations would behave, right? However, you can use them to support your specific business functions. If there is some level of categorization that you want to do in your project, right, and that categorization cannot be achieved with any of the delivered organization types, you can go ahead and create a custom organization, right? Now we'll go ahead and look at each one of them in more detail. However, as I just said, uh, all these are your organizations, right? your location, your cost center, your supervisory organization, matrix, and custom. So many people get confused between a supervisory org and organizations. So organization is a generic term which consists of multiple organization types, right? A supervisory organization is just one of the organizations in Workday, right? As I said, your organizations, they are nothing but a tool which you can use to group workers. For example, you can use a supervisory org to group workers, right? It is a tool to group locations. It is a tool to group resources in order to support a specific business function that you might have, right? Okay, now let's talk about these organizations in detail, and that is when uh, things would become clear for you. All right, now let's talk about a supervisory organization, right? Sorry, guys. Okay, so let's talk about a sup org or a supervisory org, right? Now, your supervisory org is the foundation of organization in Workday HCM Core, right? So when you start with building your HCM Core, right? When you start with your implementation, this is usually the first organization or that you would create, right? Now, your supervisory organization is in turn based on location. So whenever you create a supervisory organization, you would need at least one location in the tenant. We'll look at all of that in a bit, right? However, as I just said, your supervisory org is a foundation org in Workday. And why do I say it is a foundation of organization or a foundation object in Workday, right? Uh, all your if you want to staff anyone in Workday, right? Because you are building a HCM system, so obviously you would add a number of employees, right from your CEO at the lowest level, right? Now all your staffing can happen with respect to a supervisory org. So you cannot perform any other activity in Workday if you do not have a supervisory organization set up, right? Now, what is the purpose of a supervisory organization, right? Uh, Now, as we spoke earlier, right, your supervisory organizations, they are a tool in order to group workers or your employees into a management hierarchy, right? Uh, For example, let's say again, I'm running this company called XYZ Corp, right? Uh, Now, as part of this company, I'll have a CEO, right? My CEO, to this CEO would be reporting a number of EVPs or VPs, right? So my vice presidents, maybe below them, I have my uh, vice presidents, right? I have my senior managers, right? Maybe then I have my managers and my leads, and then maybe my individual contributors, right? So this is a management hierarchy in terms of my managerial levels, right? Now, how do they report into each other? With the help of an org unit or a supervisory organization, right? So I create a supervisory org called XYZ Corp, which represents my entire enterprise, right? Who is the manager of this enterprise called XYZ Corp? It is my CEO, right? Uh, as part of this XYZ Corp, let's say I have maybe two or three different departments or divisions or maybe functional areas, whatever you want to call them, right? I have my back office wherein all my back office functions happen. For example, my finance, my HR, everything is part of this back office. Let's say I have my sales as one more division or department or a functional area. Similarly, I have my manufacturing. Right? Now, each of these are led by, let's assume, a EVP, right? And so you have your CEO at the top, who is the manager of XYZ Corp. Under my CEO, I have three. All right, so I have uh, in XYZ Corp three EVPs. Each of them lead a specific uh, supervisory organization or a specific department represented in Workday through a supervisory organization, right? They in turn report to my CEO, right? Under my back office, as I just said, there might be two departments. One is my HR, one is my finance, right? Each of them might be led by a vice president, right? Or similarly, I might have my entire structure, right? Now, how is this structure represented in Workday? With the help of my supervisory organizations, right? So I create each of these departments or divisions or functional areas or offices, however your company is structured, right? You would go ahead and create a supervisory organization. You would assign a manager to that supervisory organization. Now, my manager could be a CEO, his role could be a vice president, he could be a senior manager, he could just be a lead, right? I can assign them as managers, right? Now, as a manager, they would have their own direct reports, right? All of whom are part of the specific supervisory organization in question, right? So this is how I go ahead and represent my management hierarchy or my company hierarchy in Workday, right? Through the help of something or with the help of an organization type called supervisory organization, right? Any questions, guys? Right? I've already spoken that you go ahead and create a supervisory organization. Now, a supervisory organization can represent anything in Workday, right? It can be used to represent a business unit, right? These are all subtypes of a supervisory org. You can go ahead and create any number of subtypes you want to, right? You can create custom subtypes. There are a few Workday delivered as well, right? So these are nothing but a way to additionally classify your supervisory org, right? However, in terms of functions, in terms of their capabilities, they are all exactly the same. We'll see in tenant how they are built. For now, uh, we are just talking about the theory, right? So your supervisory organization can be a business unit, it could be a department, it could be a division, right? It could be a project in itself or any other structure, right? Okay. Now, a supervisory organization has a few unique properties which are uh, restricted or which are not available on any other organization type, right? Uh, we'll look at what are the key characteristics of a supervisory organization, right? So there are four key characteristics of a suborg, right? And these characteristics are not available or in any other organization type, right? The first unique characteristic right, is that your positions, they can only be created within a supervisory org, right? So it is your positions on which we know that employees are hired or staffed, right? So I've created a position called CEO, who is the manager of my XYZ Corp. Now let's say some person, Ravi Verma, who is the CEO, right? So your positions can only be created on a supervisory org, right? So there are many other organization types, your locations, your company, and many others in Workday. However, if you want to create a position, that can only happen on a super, right? I think there we have a few questions. Any questions? All right. Okay. So the first unique characteristic is your positions can only be created within a supervisory org, right? Second, your staffing can only happen within a supervisory org, right? So when you hire someone onto Workday, you would need a supervisory org, right? Let's say if you're transferring someone, right? If you're promoting someone, you're doing a job change, uh, you're for any of those activities, any of your staffing activities can only happen on a supervisory org, right? So now once I have hired someone onto a supervisory org, he can be assigned as a member of any other organization type as well, right? For example, let's say I'm hiring someone under my manufacturing supervisory org, right? Now this employee who is hired, he can belong to Hyderabad, right? So he would be a member of my location, uh, called Hyderabad, right? He could belong to a cost center called manufacturing cost center, right? He could belong to a company called XYZ Corp, or he could be a part of any other organization in Workday, right? However, for all of that to happen, he should be hired, and he can only be hired on on a supervisory org, right? So all my employees, they must be hired or staffed into a supervisory organization, right? So I cannot do any staffing or hiring on any other organization type, right? The third unique characteristic is that unique business processes can be assigned to a supervisory org or a super, right? Now we'll look at this specific term in detail when we talk about business processes, right? However, for now, let's go back to our example, right? Let's say I have this supervisory structure, right? I have my XYZ Corp, I have my back office, uh, which in turn consists of two other departments called finance and HR. Maybe I have a sales department which would again have multiple sub departments or divisions or whatever, right? And I have my manufacturing as well, right? Now, let's say I have a unique requirement when I hire someone onto my back office departments, maybe finance or maybe HR, because these are some of the critical departments wherein employees would have access to all my company data, right? For example, someone in finance department, he would know all my company data, and I want to introduce an additional background check for any employee who works for these departments, right? Now anyone who gets hired in the other departments, they probably don't need that background check. Maybe they need a additional drug test, right? Maybe that is how my organization is structured, right? So I do a background check, right? uh, Additional background check when someone gets hired in back office. When someone gets hired in either sales or manufacturing, I do a additional or a specific kind of drug test. Right? Maybe that is how my hiring business is structured or my process is structured. Right? Now I can go ahead and configure unique business processes for, as if my statement says, unique business processes can be assigned to a supervisory org. Right? What I can do is I can go ahead and configure my business process called hire, right? So that my hire business process, when it triggers, if the employee is being hired for any of the back office departments, Workday would automatically trigger an additional background check step for him, right? It would not trigger a drug test. Similarly, if an employee gets hired and he gets hired for any of these two departments, Workday would not trigger a background check, right? It would ignore this step. It rather it would go ahead and trigger a drug test step for them, right? So they have to go through this additional drug test, right? So this is how I can go ahead and configure my business processes. And how is this configuration done? It is done on a supervisory org, right? So I can go ahead and define unique uh, definitions of business processes for a supervisory org, right? Now if I've defined a unique business process definition for back office, it would be applicable for back office, but also all the other supervisory orgs which are below back office, right? So every supervisory org which is part of this tree, right? Similarly, if I've defined a unique definition of my business process for XYZ Corp, right? It would be applicable for not just XYZ Corp, but also all the three supervisory orgs who report into them, right? So if I've defined something on a specific supervisory org, it is relevant for that supervisory org and all its subtrees unless I define something explicitly on the subtree as well, right? So if I define a unique definition of higher BP on XYZ Corp, it is applicable for XYZ Corp and the entire structure. Let's say I define another unique definition for my back office. So it is BO higher BP, right? Now the definition that I have defined for back office, it would take precedence on this definition, right? And this definition would be used for hiring employees in back office and its subordinates, right? So we'll look at that in detail when we talk about business processes and we do staffing. But for now, your unique business processes can be assigned for a SUPOC, right? And this can only be done with respect to a SUPOC. So not just hiring, no matter which business process you're doing, create position, job change, termination, hiring restrictions, and there are hundreds of business processes, right? Each of them can be uniquely defined for a supervisory org, right? And this cannot be done for any organization type. All right, now the fourth unique property is your assignable roles. They have responsibilities within a supervisory org, right? So, for example, again, if I assign my CEO to XYZ Corp. Now, this CEO has a role responsibility within XYZ Corp supervisory org, right? So, if this XYZ Corp has 10 direct reportees, my CEO as a manager of this supervisory org is only responsible for those reportees, right? My manufacturing again has maybe 5 direct reportees. Now, my manager of the manufacturing is responsible for those five reportees, right? Now, we'll talk about these roles in detail once we start talking about supervisory org, and then we'll talk about Workday assignable role. But for now, your roles have responsibilities within a supervisory org, right? So, my manager of the sales department, he will not be able to see, or he will not be automatically assigned as a manager of maybe back office or finance or HR as well, right? So his responsibility is within the sales department.
One question.
Hmm. Yeah.
Say you are saying hire BP1, hire BP2 based on the uniqueness of the process.
Hmm.
But so would it be the same for other business process, like
Yes.
transferring an employee?
Yes. So any business process, and Workday has given us hundreds of business processes, not just directly related to staffing. If let's say with respect to creating a requisition, I want to configure a unique definition for different department, or for that matter, any other business process as well. I can go ahead and configure a unique definition, and this can only happen with respect to a supervisory org, right? So I just took hire as an example, but any other business process as well, it would follow the same logic. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
All right. All right. Now let's log into our tenant. We have looked at a lot of theory. Let's see how we can create a supervisory org. All right. So the task for creating a supervisory org for me is create supervisory organization, right? So this is my task I can use to create a supervisory organization. That is, create supervisory organization. Let me open this task. All right. Now, when I create a supervisory organization, Workday asks me for something called a reorganization ID. Uh, for now, I'll just select anything and we'll talk about this in a bit, right? Okay. Now, this is the template which is available to me for creating a supervisory organization, right? The first thing I'll have to specify is my availability date, right? Now, this is the date from which my supervisory organization is effective in my tenant, right? I can select any date, right? Right. Uh, and when I search, or when I, for example, if the supervisory organization is created effective today, if the effective date is 5th of March, if I hire someone, anyone before 5th of March in the supervisory org, Workday would not allow me to do that, right? So your availability date defines from what date your supervisory organization is available in your tenant, and you can staff people onto it, right? Uh, you would go ahead and give a name. We'll talk about this part in a bit, right? If I come down, as I said, you can create a supervisory org and you can define it or categorize it as anything, right? So you can say that your supervisory org is a business unit, it's a division, it's a department, or any other naming convention you use, right? So your XYZ Corp, it has three divisions. back office, sales, or manufacturing, right? Or maybe you call them as business units or business lines or any other name. Now, how do you map them? As I said, as far as is concerned, they are all created exactly the same way. They have the same capabilities, right? You only categorize them as either a business unit or business line or divider or department or division or any other thing. Now, how do you do that? You do that with the help of something called a subtype, right? Now, Workday has given for each of the organization type a set of subtypes, but then based on your requirement, you also have the ability to go ahead and create your own subtypes, right? How do you do that? Mm, not maintain organization. Okay, so how do I do that? You do that with the help of your maintain organization subtypes, right? Let's say if I open my supervisory organization template now, right, and I click on this subtype options, right, when I click on this prompt or drop down, there are a number of subtypes which are available, right? Department, division, group, and many other, right? If I go back and I go to this view task called organization subtypes, and I select for supervisory. Well done. So all these are subtypes which have been enabled for my supervisory, right? Now you can go ahead and create a subtype which is valid for more than one organization types as well, right? It completely depends on your business requirement. For example, I have this subtype called business unit, which is enabled for both supervisory as well as business unit one. Similarly, I have a subtype called company, which is enabled for my organization type company, company hierarchy, as well as supervisory, right? So these adding a specific subtype, this is just a name. Uh, it there's no other significance to it except for that you want to classify your hierarchy or your supervisory structure, right? So I can go ahead and create any new subtype, right? For example, uh, let's say I create something called a project group, right? I'll go ahead and select organization type in it, right? I'll select supervisory, right? If I want, I could also add anything else as well, right? I can add any other uh, organization type as well, a location or matrix or any other organization. For now, I'll not do that, right? I'll just create a subtype called WDB, right? 27.2, that is our batch, right? So it is workday batch 27th Feb, and then I'm naming it as project group, right? Now you can include your subtype in the display name as well. Once you do that, the moment I create my organization, the subtype name would automatically append here, right? Uh, for example, I'll show you. Let me say, right? For example, for supervisory organization type, there's a subtype called supervisory defined, right? And the option called include in display name is selected, right? If I say okay, right? So I've added my new subtype in here for my organization type called supervisory, right? Now if I go back and I'll have to relaunch this, create supervisory organization. I'll select any reorganization for now. Once I do OK, if I go back, I see that my new subtype is now available for me, right? For now, I'll just select supervisory, right? Uh, let's say I create a supervisory organization and I name it as first supporg, right? Uh, I have selected a subtype. I have named my supervisory organization, right? Uh, what I can do is, if I want to further refine my supervisory organization, for example, what you see here is that my name is not a mandatory field. All my mandatory fields are represented with the help of this red star, right? So why is that your name is not a mandatory field? Because the moment you create a supervisory org, even if I create it with a blank name, Workday would allow me to go ahead and create this supervisory org. And the reason it does that is because internally, Workday would go ahead and assign it a unique organization ID, right? So let's say if there are 10 different supergs all with the same name, again Workday would go ahead and allow me to use duplicate names. The reason is Workday assigns a unique organization ID to each organization type that I create, right? So I have the option of selecting whether I want to display the unique organization ID in name or not, right? So when I create multiple supervisory orgs with the same name, uh, Workday, I can go ahead and identify them with the help of the unique organization ID which Workday has created, right? And that is why I have this option to include organization ID in name, right? I have a few other options as well. If I want to uniquely identify my supervisory org, let's say I create all my superorgs at the same level with the same name, and I want to identify my superorgs, right? I can also go ahead and assign it a code. For example, I'll say it is 1, and then I can also say that I want to include this code in the name, right? Once I select include code in the name, my code becomes a mandatory field, right? If it is removed, my code is no more a mandatory field, right? I also have the ability to go ahead and specify that a manager's name should be included in the supervisory naming, right? So it says include managers or leaders name. If I look at some of the, let's see, if I search for Logan McNeil, right? So what you see here, not here, right? For example, this is the supervisory org, right? I have the supervisory org European Investment Bank Company, and I also have the name of the manager appended right here, right? The reason is I've selected that include manager name in the code, right? Which is usually done. For some of the other supervisory orgs, I see that there's a code appended. So I have my Dharami 8620, which is a sup org. My manager's name is appended, Logan McNeil, but I also have the code of the supervisory org appended, or the organization ID of the supervisory organization appended, because I have selected include organization ID, right? So I have this code which is 100, right? uh, this organization ID is something which Workday has delivered or generated automatically, which is available right here, right? And Workday has appended the manager's name, right? And also the organization ID for me because I've selected those specific checkboxes. For now, I'll not select any of those. I'll just say include manager's name, right? Now, if I come down, I have something called a visibility. Now, this visibility decides or defines who all can view my supervisory org, right? The most common option, which is selected, is everyone. Everyone would be able to search and view for a supervisory org if they have the authorization to view supervisory orgs in the first place, right? If I have that authorization, I will be able to find any supervisory orgs which are created with the visibility as everyone, right?
Ali has a question here. Sorry
Mm-hmm.
to interrupt.
Yeah, sure.
So in the Logan McLean that has created
Mm-hmm.
as 100 unique code. Whenever you are showing something, it is showing the unique ID. It start with the 300 series. So here is a code is 100, right? Whenever shows
Right.
in the top,
Mm-hmm.
Dharni 86
Mm-hmm.
8620 and the supervisory organization 6-365. So is there
Mm-hmm.
any connectivity in between them?
Any connection between my organization ID and my code? Is that your
Uh,
question? See,
yes.
each of these are independent. Your organization ID, Workday would automatically go ahead and generate them for you. So it would go ahead and generate a unique organization ID. My code is something I have the ability to enter manually. If I go ahead and edit,
But
uh-huh,
it is not showing anywhere this 100, right?
because I've
Then
not
how can we
selected
add?
it. Right?
Okay.
So I have just selected create assign my code. I can also assign a different number and I can say include code in name, right?
Okay. Okay. Got it.
Now if you see, Workday has is also showing me the code, right? So it all depends on what you have selected. So my code is right at the starting as a prefix. I have the name of the organization, I have manager's name, and I have my organization ID. So it all depends on what selection you have made. Okay.
Okay. Got it.
All right.
Thank you.
So I have my visibility as everyone. So anyone who has the authorization to view a supervisory org would be able to search the supervisory org. All right. I also have a few other options. I have something called a role assignee. Now, the moment I select role assignee, anyone who has a role assigned on this supervisory org, for example, if I go back to this supervisory org, there are a number of roles, but not all roles have an assignee. I have a role called hierarchy owner, which is assigned to Logan McNeil. Let me scroll down. I have a manager again. Logan McNeil is a manager, uh, and that is it, right? Let's say I make someone as an SAR manager, some Anil Verma or Rakesh Sharma, right? Now, everyone who has a role assigned on this supervisory org, only those people would be able to view this supervisory org, right? No matter what role they have been assigned, a manager, a compensation partner, a CVS new, a test UK, or whatever other roles I have created, if anyone is assigned a role, then they would be able to view this, right? The third option is role assignees and members. Now in this case, if anyone has been assigned a role, they can see the supervisory org, but also if anyone is a member. So member is nothing but if I have hired someone in that supervisory org, right? Then that person would be able to view that supervisory org. Let me pick any supervisory org. Let's say uh, mm, let's take this one. Okay, no members. Let me go to Logan's profile. I'll go to this supervisory org. So now if I select the third option, role assignees and members, all those people who have a role for example, Maria Cardones, Adian, Logan, and anyone else, but also all those people who are hired and are direct members of that supervisory org would be able to see this supervisory org, right? The final one is role assignees of current and superiors. Again, in this case, anyone who is assigned a role on this supervisory org would be able to see it, but not just this supervisory org. Any role assignee who has been assigned a role on the superior superorg, right? They would also be able to view and search for this superorg, right? I have all these four options. The most common option, or which is always used, is everyone. If there are any specific requirements wherein I only want certain people to see a supervisory org or any other organization type, I'll select those specific options, right? Please remember, these are the same options which are available everywhere, not just superorg, other option organization types as well, right? Now we'll talk about locations in detail in a bit. For now, whenever you create a supervisory org, you would need to define a location for it, right? So in a logical sequence, when you implement your workday, the first thing you would create is at least one location so that you can search for that location, right? Now, similar to your supervisory org, you can create hundreds of different locations, all with the same name. The reason Workday allows you to enter duplicate names is because uh, Workday assigns a unique reference IDs to them internally to identify them, right? So I've assigned a location, Atlanta, right? Now my supervisory organization is ready, right? This is all I do, right? But Workday would not allow me to submit my supervisory organization as of now. If I say okay, Workday would give me an error. It would ask me to select a staffing model, right? Now there are two staffing models. We'll talk about them in detail in a bit when we start talking about staffing. But for now, if you look and go back to my previous statement, which says all your positions can be created on your supervisory org and all your staffing or hiring can only happen on a supervisory org, right? So it is your staffing model which determines what kind of staffing or hiring would happen on the super org, right? So I have job managed, position managed. We'll talk about them in detail. For now, it would be enough to understand that these staffing models, they determine how my staffing would happen, right? So for now I'm just selecting any one job managed and I say okay, right? Now if you see, because I selected that manager's name should be included, there's no manager assigned as of now, right? It shows me a blank parenthesis or brackets because there's no manager assigned. All the other details are available. So I selected my type as supervisory. Now, if I go back and look at maintain organization types and I look at supervisory, the reason uh, I said include in display name for supervisory. So Workday automatically appends that supervisory as a subtype to the supervisory org I created, right? So the name of my supervisory org was just first superorg. I selected subtype as supervisory, and Workday has automatically suffixed my supervisory at the end, right? The reason is because I have selected this checkbox which says include in display name, right? If I create a new superorg with my WDB, uh, which I this one, because I've not selected that checkbox, Workday would not append my subtype name to the superorg. All right. So this is one simple, very simple interface. We just need to understand the concept. How it is done in Workday is pretty simple for most of the things. right? So today we have created a SUPOC. We'll look at some of the other options tomorrow. We'll see what is a reorganization, which I had to select when I created the SUPOC. We'll also see what is how a location can be created and what is the significance of a location. Why is it a mandatory field? We'll also look at some of the reorganization options in Workday, right? When I say a reorganization option, for example, this SUPOC which is created, it has a superior organization, right? If I click on that superior organization, now I see that this superior has a new superior intern, but it also has that subordinate. So how do you create this reporting tree or this management tree is something we'll go ahead and look at tomorrow, right? And of course, this SUPOC has multiple employees. A SUPOC again, this SUPOC again has a few employees who are assigned as direct reports. So we'll look at some of these reorganization options